I think it's time I started a new life without you. That sentence cut through the warm air of the graduation party like a cold blade. In a fancy restaurant on the outskirts of Boston, where crystal chandeliers sparkled over wine glasses and laughter, the soft clinking of silverware came to a halt. Every pair of eyes turned toward my husband. Mitchell, the man I'd spent nearly 25 years with, standing in the middle of our daughter Sophia's celebration, his champagne glass still raised. My name is Penelope Harris. I'm 52 years old, and up until that moment, I had carried the title of devoted wife, caring mother, the so-called strong woman everyone praised. But even strength has its limits. Mitchell was supposed to be delivering a heartfelt speech, celebrating our daughter for graduating with honors in architecture from the University of Washington. Instead, he stood up, microphone in one hand, his other arm resting lightly on Sophia's shoulder, setting the stage for what he clearly thought would be his grand moment. "What did he just say?" Someone at the left table gasped in disbelief. I stayed seated. Time, for me, had frozen. Sophia, still in her burgundy graduation gown, cap tilted to one side, stared at her father as if he had just turned into a stranger. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my glass. I didn't cry like everyone expected. I simply smiled. A smile that instantly tensed the entire room. "Thank you for your honesty," I said, my voice as soft as a breeze brushing past a glass of red wine. Then, I slowly reached into my handbag and pulled out a cream-colored envelope, sealed and neatly pressed, and placed it right next to Mitchell's silver plate. "What's this?" he asked, the smug smile on his face beginning to fade. "Something for you to read after the party," I replied calmly, as if I were simply handing him the dessert menu. Mitchell squinted at me, confused. He wasn't used to my silence. He wasn't used to my composure. For years, I'd been the one holding this family's rhythm, making plans, playing mediator, putting my dreams on hold to lift up his ever-changing ambitions. I turned to Sophia and kissed her forehead. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. This day belongs to you. Don't let anyone steal it." I stood, adjusted the olive green hem of my dress, took a deep breath, and addressed the room. "Please enjoy your meal. Thank you all for joining us," I said, voice steady and clear. I walked through the stiff silence of dozens of frozen gazes. Friends, former coworkers, relatives from both sides, and even Heather, the young blonde woman at the far end of the table. Someone I had hosted in my home more than once, never knowing she was now Mitchell's close companion. As the heavy wooden door closed behind me, I heard Mitchell's voice break behind me for the first time. "Penelope, what the hell did you just do? What is this?" I didn't turn back. There was no need. I had planned for this day months in advance. I drove through the thinning woods, tinged with the orange hues of late May, leaving behind the upscale restaurant and the murmurs I no longer cared to hear. My heart beat steadily, as if it had already known this moment was coming, and the truth is, it had. I had lived with Mitchell for 25 years. That's no short journey. I once believed I knew him better than anyone. But what I hadn't expected was that one day, I'd have to use the financial analysis skills I had tucked away for decades to trace the footsteps of my own husband's betrayal. I had once been a financial advisor for a major firm in Seattle. I loved that job. The logic, the control, the numbers. But when Sophia was born and Mitchell decided to chase his dream of being his own boss, I left work. To care for our family, to support him. "Just 2 years," he had said, holding Sophia in one arm while sketching out a business plan for a software company that never saw the light of day. 2 years turned into 20. I don't regret giving my youth to the family. But now, looking back, I regret believing that sacrifice was the only thing that could hold a marriage together. 3 years ago, when Mitchell decided to invest in an eco-lodge project in Oregon with a college buddy, I offered to review the contract. He refused, laughing. You always overthink. I've got a good instinct. This time is different. That time, we lost nearly $60,000. Money I had quietly saved from part-time freelance gigs, labeled as Sophia's grad school fund. I didn't argue. I just silently crossed out one more dream in the notebook I'd kept since college, opening a financial center for women in midlife. Once again, maybe later. Everything began to change on a morning nearly 8 months ago. Mitchell asked me to transfer funds from our joint account to pay Sophia's final tuition installment. While reviewing the transactions, I stumbled upon a suspicious payment. $3,200 had been sent to an account under the name H. Rivers. Stranger still, this same transaction had occurred every month for nearly a year, sometimes for as much as $5,000. I didn't say anything. I simply began watching. I opened a separate Excel file and started building a detailed financial map, the kind I use to prepare for high-profile clients. I tracked every expense, every receipt, every tiny clue: a dinner reservation at a French restaurant in downtown Portland, a bracelet from Tiffany's, a rental car invoice in Napa Valley. None of it was for me. I had never dined at La Belle Maison, and I certainly wasn't the one who received a gold bracelet wrapped in a purple ribbon on February 14th. The recipient, I suspected, was Heather Rivers, Mitchell's new communications assistant, 18 years his junior, with a smile that was just a little too bright and a laugh sharp as shattered glass. I had hosted Heather at our home last Christmas. I even offered her homemade gingerbread and hot cocoa made with Sophia's childhood recipe. She had smiled warmly, calling me the perfect mom. I once believed she meant it. That discovery didn't make me scream. Instead, I felt a deep coldness spread through my chest, like an invisible contract being ripped apart. And I, the one who had signed it with all my heart, was the last to be notified. I started gathering evidence. Quietly, carefully. I knew the law, how to document financial activity without violating privacy. I even hired a private attorney from outside the city, someone who specialized in complex divorce cases involving finances. Together, we reviewed the prenuptial agreement Mitchell had once insisted I sign back in 1999, claiming it was just in case your career takes off one day. Ironically, that very agreement, with its binding fidelity clause, became the key to turning the tables. If infidelity could be proven, Mitchell would lose not only his polished image among friends, but also the house in Bellevue, the joint investment accounts I had once agreed to share, and nearly 70% of our marital assets. I had saved all of it for today, the day he naively believed he would shock me. But what Mitchell never expected was that I had been wide awake for a long time, and I was waiting for him to walk into his own final move. I've always believed that a real battle doesn't start with shouting, it begins with silence. The same silence I walked out of that restaurant with, head high, shoulders straight, leaving Mitchell and his dream of freedom behind, with a small envelope he hadn't dared to open. But this battle didn't just begin that night. I had been preparing for nearly 4 months, ever since I discovered the hidden messages between Mitchell and Heather. Messages disguised under the name Chris IT Support, which he thought I would never question. I started by backing up all iCloud data after Mitchell forgot to sign out on our shared computer. Messages, photos, digital receipts, spa appointments, everything was saved onto an encrypted drive only I had access to. No rushing, no rage. I knew time is the most loyal ally when used well. Next, I contacted Lawrence Maddox, a seasoned divorce attorney in Spokane, known for his quiet but lethal strategies. I met him one Tuesday afternoon at a small cafe that none of our social circle frequented. I reserved a hidden booth, wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, like I was scouting for a spy movie, and in many ways, I was. After reviewing the documents I provided, Lawrence gave a single nod. "This prenup is a forgotten treasure," he said. The fidelity clause still stands, and you've nearly got everything needed to prove the breach. What Mitchell had forgotten, or perhaps never cared to understand, was that very prenuptial agreement he had pushed me to sign before our wedding in 1998. Back then, I had just inherited around $140,000 from my grandfather, while Mitchell was a mid-level marketing associate. He was afraid of a financial imbalance and urged me to sign just for peace of mind. I agreed, never suspecting a thing. And now, that same piece of paper had become a legal dagger he couldn't dodge. Lawrence and I prepared the divorce filing in silence, every document reviewed to the last comma. The King County Court accepted the case exactly 5 days before Sophia's graduation. We requested a sealed file in the initial phase, so Mitchell wouldn't catch wind of it. During that time, I continued living as usual. Still made Mitchell his morning coffee, still smiled politely when he complained about work stress, and even accompanied him to a charity gala last month, where he proudly introduced Heather as a brilliant creative partner. Behind the scenes, I quietly removed my name from joint investments, placed our property title under legal audit status with help from an old friend who worked as a notary, opened a private account at a different bank, and began transferring my rightful assets. I even hired an independent appraiser to evaluate our real estate holdings, in case Mitchell tried to skew the asset division. Even taking Sophia dress shopping for graduation was part of the plan, maintaining my role as a supportive mother, ensuring she wouldn't suspect a thing, and shielding her big day from a brutal truth she didn't yet need to carry. Though my heart had been breaking, I chose to carry the truth alone, until it could no longer hurt my daughter. And then, when Mitchell stood up in the middle of the party, wearing that confident look like he was about to drop a psychological bomb on my life, I simply smiled. He had no idea I'd already pulled the pin. The envelope he held that day contained a copy of the divorce filing, court-stamped, along with a detailed list of evidence proving his violation of the fidelity clause: photos, text messages, receipts, bank statements. This wasn't an emotional attack. It was an official declaration that the game had begun, and he was already a step behind. That evening, I didn't go home. I drove straight to an Airbnb apartment in Redmond that I had reserved under an alias. Not to run, but to stay outside the game and watch the opponent walk into his own trap. And sure enough, just a few hours later, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Mitchell called, then Heather, then his best friend Logan, the neighbor, even my former mother-in-law. I silenced it and sent only one message to Lauren. The net is closed. I'm ready for the next move. The next morning, I woke up in that quiet Airbnb. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching a small jar of wildflowers on the kitchen table. It was the first time in months I had slept through the night. No dreams, no overthinking, no waking up to the heavy breathing of a man I once thought would be my safe place forever. And the clock struck 8 a.m., my phone buzzed. The caller ID said, "Home." Mitchell. I let it ring. Then came the texts. 1, 2. By the 6th, I finally opened them. "Penelope, we need to talk. I don't understand what you've done. When did you file for divorce? Why did you choose yesterday? Is there any question he hasn't already answered for himself?" That afternoon, I returned home. Knowing Mitchell was out at work, I needed to grab a few personal items and, more importantly, lock down everything that no longer belonged to him. The 2-story house in suburban Bellevue was eerily quiet. The family photos lining the staircase now looked like props from a play that had long since ended. I went upstairs to the master bedroom, opened the safe, placed all the legal documents into a secure box, then changed the code. Mitchell wouldn't touch a single sheet again. Suddenly, the front door slammed open. Footsteps. That familiar voice, now sounding completely out of place in the home that once belonged to both of us. "Penelope!" Mitchell shouted, breathless, gripping the crumpled envelope. "What is this? Are you trying to destroy everything?" I stepped out of the room, composed. "No, Mitchell. You already did that. I'm just cleaning up the aftermath. He threw the envelope onto the table. His face was flushed, eyes narrowed, searching for some crack in my calm to exploit. This is cruel. We have a daughter. We have history. I crossed my arms, and because we have a daughter, I chose this path. I stayed silent long enough so Sophia could have her graduation day intact. Now, it's my turn. Mitchell glanced around, as if the walls might back him up. I'm not leaving. This is my house, too. I pulled out a copy of the temporary court order, granting me exclusive use of the shared property during divorce proceedings. I placed it next to the envelope. You have 48 hours to pack your things. After that, the locks will be changed. You can hire a lawyer to respond, but don't expect me to bend. Mitchell narrowed his eyes, his voice lowering. You think you've won? I didn't answer. I simply opened the door and pointed outside. He stood there for a few seconds, then pulled out his phone to call someone, probably Heather. I didn't care. That evening, Sophia called. Mom? Her voice was shaky. I heard what happened. Dad, he's not telling the truth. I need to hear it from you. Where are you? I asked. I'm on my way home. My flight got moved up. I paused. You don't need to rush, Sophia. I've taken care of everything. I don't want you to get dragged into this. I'm your daughter, and I'm also someone Dad betrayed. You think I can't feel that? Her voice grew stronger. 2 hours later, she walked through the front door with her suitcase. Her face still held traces of tears, but her eyes, those eyes, were steady and sharp like mirrors. I told her everything. The suspicious transfers, the fake contact names, the breached prenup. I held nothing back. Sophia sat in silence for a while, then said, Dad hugged me that morning, told me he was proud, all while planning to walk away from us just hours later. I held her hand. Your father changed. Or maybe he was always this way and we just didn't see it. Sophia leaned against my shoulder. You're not alone, Mom. I'm here. And when Mitchell returned the next day for the last time to pick up his things, he didn't say a word, just walked past the two of us on the sofa. Sophia didn't flinch. She looked her father dead in the eye and said, not loudly, but with clarity that struck him to the core, Dad, you can leave, but it's Mom I'm proud of, and she's not going to fall apart. Mitchell turned his face away. The door closed behind him, not just the wooden one, but the door to a family he had deliberately set on fire. The preliminary hearing took place on a gray Wednesday morning in a small courtroom at the King County Courthouse. I sat at the petitioner's table next to attorney Lawrence Maddox. Across from us, Mitchell appeared visibly worn, his face drawn, his eyes sunken from lack of sleep, or maybe for the first time in his life, from being pushed out of the comfort zone I had unknowingly shielded for years. Seated next to him was his new attorney, a young woman in her early 30s dressed in a beige suit named Sasha Bellamy. From the way she flipped through files and spoke, I could tell she was well educated, but lacked experience in divorce cases involving strategic finances. Mitchell didn't realize this case had long since moved beyond amicable resolution. The judge entered, an older woman with silver hair pinned in a tight bun, wearing thin metal-framed glasses. Her gaze swept the courtroom like a laser, pausing on each person as if reading straight through them. We will begin, she said, tapping her gavel softly. Lawrence spoke first. Clear, firm, and thorough, he laid out the evidence, one by one, from bank statements, text messages, property transfer documents, to the fidelity clause in the prenuptial agreement signed 25 years ago. Your Honor, Lawrence began calmly, this is not merely a marriage ending due to lost affection. This is systematic deception over the course of many months, with significant financial damage to the petitioner. Mitchell's lawyer objected, claiming the prenuptial agreement was no longer valid due to time, and that emotions change. It's human nature. The judge raised an eyebrow and turned to page 4 of the agreement. Clause 9A, The fidelity clause remains in effect for the duration of the marriage and continues until the finalization of divorce proceedings if initiated. I saw Mitchell's back stiffen as if someone were pulling on his jacket, his hand clenched until his knuckles turned white. The respondent's plans to cohabit with a third party are documented through emails, text messages, and a down payment on an apartment in Redmond, all funded through joint assets. This is a clear breach of financial transparency within the marriage, Lawrence emphasized. Mitchell didn't look at me. He kept his head down, like even his own reflection had become too much to face. The judge nodded. The court will uphold the freeze on joint assets. The petitioner, Mrs. Penelope Harris, will retain exclusive use of the marital residence until the property division is finalized. The room grew heavy with silence. The judge paused for a moment, then firmly stated, "The court also recognizes the prenuptial agreement as legally valid. Given the breach of terms by the respondent, the majority of assets shall be awarded to Mrs. Harris. This includes full ownership of the Bellevue residence, 70% of the joint investment portfolio, and all retirement accounts primarily contributed by the petitioner." The gavel struck firmly. I didn't smile. I simply exhaled, slowly. A chapter closed, not with tears but through the law and clarity. As I exited the courthouse, Mitchell called out to me. I stopped. "Penelope," he rasped, "are you really going to leave me with nothing?" I turned and looked him straight in the eye. "No, Mitchell. You're the one who lost yourself. I simply stopped protecting something no longer worth saving." He didn't reply. He just stood there, a man who once believed he controlled the board, now defeated, without a single pawn left. 3 days later, I heard that Heather had moved out of their shared rental. No goodbye, no message. Apparently, she had just discovered the bitter truth. The apartment was never in both their names, as Mitchell promised, and now had a credit alert attached due to his chaotic finances. A friend told me Heather had gone back to working at a small marketing agency in Spokane, saying she'd been lied to about everything. I didn't feel joy, nor pity. Everyone has to learn their lesson. Sadly, sometimes, the price isn't paid by only one person. As for Mitchell, I heard he's now renting a one-bedroom apartment near the Central bus station. The once luxury SUV was repossessed by the bank because the loan was under both our names, but now the debt is his alone to carry. A week after the hearing, I got a call from Mara Jennings, an old friend and neighbor of mine and Mitchell's for over a decade. She worked at a real estate firm in the Bellevue area, so few financial or romantic details escaped her. "Penelope," Mara began in a low voice, "I just saw Heather. She came to terminate the apartment lease with Mitchell. She looked like she'd just been thrown out of a dream." I wasn't surprised. Heather left just 4 days after hearing the trial results. Maybe she'd imagined a life with Mitchell, filled with Palm Springs vacations, Napa Valley wine, and a luxury SUV parked outside a Lakeview condo. Instead, she got a very different picture. A bank loan being called in, credit cards frozen due to suspicious activity, and a high-yield portfolio that turned out to be 3 penny stocks Mitchell randomly bought in 2012. She left behind 2 suitcases of clothes and a Bluetooth speaker, according to the building's security guard, and she didn't leave a note. Mitchell called me 2 days later. I didn't answer. He left a message. "You really want me to lose everything? Heather's gone. I've got no one left. No one believes me anymore." I listened, but didn't respond. I didn't need to say anything. Everything was clear now. Every choice he made had come back like stones, dragging him to the bottom. Word spread quickly among our social circles. At first, it was just whispers. Then neighborhood Facebook groups started sharing public court documents. Someone had anonymously posted the summary of the ruling. The image of the once model husband became the center of gossip. People who once shook Mitchell's hand at charity galas now avoided him at the grocery store. Some even unfollowed him on LinkedIn. Matt Garrison, Mitchell's college best friend and former co-investor in a short-term project, called and asked bluntly, Did you really use the fund's money to take your assistant on vacation? Mitchell was at a loss for words. I didn't feel happy. I felt free. I didn't need Mitchell to be ruined. I just needed the truth to be seen. And now, I didn't even have to speak. His own actions told the story. That evening, Sophia came home from meeting friends. As soon as she walked in, she exclaimed, "Did something happen to Dad? My friend said Uncle Andrew," Dad's friend, posted something hinting at the biggest disappointment of my life. I sipped my tea. "Maybe your father is learning a lesson he should have learned a long time ago." Sophia looked at me. "Do you regret anything?" I thought for a moment. "I regret not acting sooner, but I don't regret leaving." She nodded. Then she smiled, a small smile, but a real one. A week later, I ran into Greg Stanton, someone I used to work with over 20 years ago. He's now the CFO of a nonprofit organization. After catching up over coffee, Greg offered, If you're really opening your own financial consulting firm, I could refer a few older female clients who want to understand how to manage their finances post-divorce or after being widowed." I smiled. "Greg, I just set up the office yesterday." Then the timing's perfect. And just like that, from the rubble, a new path opened. Not for revenge, but to help women like me who once lost their way by putting trust in the wrong person. It didn't need Mitchell to fall for me to feel strong. I just needed to know that from now on, I wouldn't be living in anyone's shadow. And Heather? I heard she moved back to Spokane, living with her sister, and returned to work as an event assistant. A painful lesson for a short-lived dream. But that's no longer my concern. I've closed that door, and this time, I'm holding the key. I stood in front of a small second-floor room in a red brick building in downtown Kirkland. The metal sign outside the window had just been installed that morning. Harry Financial Wellness, Financial Counseling for Mature Women. Below it, the slogan I had chosen after many sleepless nights. You don't have to start over. You just have to start with yourself. It was the first day I officially opened my own office, not as an employee, not to support a husband, not stepping aside for anyone else. This was my space, my voice, my value. My rebirth didn't happen overnight, but each step since that divorce hearing had led me here, where I was no longer Mitchell's wife or Sophia's mother. I was Penelope Harris, 52 years old, independent financial advisor, and I had just helped my first woman walk out of a hollow marriage with her head held high. My first client was Angela Makes, 61 years old, newly divorced from a gambling husband after 32 years of marriage. She walked into my office with a gloomy face, disorganized financial papers, and eyes that didn't believe she could survive on her own pension. 3 weeks later, after I helped her reorganize her retirement plan, unlock frozen investments, and successfully renegotiate her asset division, she held my hand with tears in her eyes. "You've done something no one in my family ever could. You helped me believe I'm not a burden." I cried after she left. Not out of sentimentality, but because I realized I had needed to hear those words too. Sophia visited the office during the 3rd week, carrying a box of homemade muffins. This place looks amazing," she beamed, glancing around the cream-painted room with framed portraits of successful women lining the walls. She looked at me for a long time, then said softly, "I didn't know you could be this strong." I hugged her. I didn't either, not until I was pushed into a corner. Sophia didn't say anything, but her eyes said it all. Trust was being rebuilt, little by little. In just 2 months, I had more than 20 female clients of varying ages. Some recently divorced, some newly widowed, some wanting to set up a college fund for a granddaughter because they didn't trust their son-in-law. They didn't come to me just because I could read a balance sheet. They came because I had survived the storm, and they could feel that in every word I spoke. I hosted a small seminar at the city library titled Finances after 50. It's not too late to take back your life. I expected 15 attendees. That day, 42 showed up, filling all 3 rows. A 74-year-old woman named Linda stood up in the middle of the session and said, "I wish I had heard this 30 years ago, but today isn't too late either." I didn't know what to say. I just smiled. On Facebook, people started sharing my posts with the caption, "The woman who lost everything and then reclaimed it all." I was invited to speak on a local podcast. An old friend who used to travel with Mitchell and me back in the day called and said, "Penelope, you're living proof that a woman can rewrite her own script." I didn't deny it, because it was true. Mitchell? He once sent me a short email after he saw my name in the local paper because of the seminar. "I never thought you'd go this far." I didn't reply, because I had already gone far, too far to look back, and I no longer cared what he thought. I ended the workday looking out the office window, where the golden-orange sunset washed over the streets of Kirkland. A city bus passed by. A middle-aged woman sat by the window, eyes closed, as if imagining a different future. I smiled, because I knew maybe one day she'd walk into my office, and I'd tell her the same thing I once couldn't believe. Life doesn't ask you to start over, it just waits for you to stand up. That morning, I woke to a strange quiet. No knocking at the door, no coffee dripping in the kitchen, no one sitting across from me at the breakfast table. April 15th. If nothing had changed, today would have been my 29th wedding anniversary with Mitchell. But instead, today was the final court hearing. I wore a square-neck white blouse, a deep navy skirt, and had my hair neatly tied back. I looked more like I was stepping onto a stage than walking into a courtroom. I didn't feel fear anymore, or anger, just a new kind of calm. A state I never thought I'd reach after all that pain. The King County Courthouse was as crowded as usual. Mitchell had arrived early, sitting slouched in a corner with a new attorney, probably his third since the case began. He looked haggard and pale, his suit wrinkled, shirt collar unbuttoned. The man who once thrived on projects, parties, and promises now looked like a shell of himself. When the judge entered, she glanced over both sides and opened the file. After reviewing the additional documents, hearing testimony from both parties, and considering the evidence submitted, the court rules. I kept my gaze steady, listening to each word as though the world around me had frozen. The prenuptial agreement is upheld in full. The plaintiff, Mrs. Penelope Harris, retains full ownership of the Bellevue home, 70% of the joint investment portfolio, all retirement accounts contributed primarily by her, and all premarital assets. The defendant, Mr. Mitchell Harris, will receive the remaining assets and may not appeal the financial terms. I took a deep breath. My heart didn't erupt. It felt weightless. I had won, but not because I wanted revenge. I won because I was no longer afraid of losing someone. I was only afraid of losing myself. After the hearing, I packed my files, nodded at Attorney Lawrence, and turned to leave the courtroom. Mitchell stepped toward me. "Penelope," he hesitated. I stopped and turned, my expression calm. I was wrong. I know that now. I just didn't expect you to go this far." I paused, then asked, "How far, Mitchell?" "Far enough to know I deserve kindness." He lowered his head and sighed. "We had 29 years. Doesn't that deserve a second chance?" I looked straight into the eyes of the man who used to be my husband. The man who once held my hand on our wedding day in a spring afternoon back in 1995. The man who once promised I would never have to face life's hardships alone. "Mitchell," I said softly, "that door." I closed it with my own hands. Not because I hate you, but because I've come to realize I never want to walk into a dark room again. He nodded, saying nothing more. Perhaps for the first time in his life, Mitchell understood what it meant to let go. When it was already too late. I turned and walked out of the courthouse hallway. without looking back. 6 months later, I stood in the middle of my new office. Bigger, brighter, always filled with the sound of women laughing and talking. Harris Financial Wellness now had 2 associates, 1 intern, and even a night class for women over 50 who wanted to take control of their finances. I wasn't just a financial advisor anymore. I was a storyteller, a listener, and a reminder that no one is coming to rescue you, but you can rescue yourself. Sophia had moved to Seattle for work, just a 20-minute drive from me. She visited often, and every time she hugged me tightly. "Mom's not standing behind anymore," she once said. "You're the one leading now." I smiled. "I'm just living honestly." For the first time in my life, exactly 1 year later, on April 15th, I drove out to Whidbey Island's shore, carrying a small cake and an unsent letter. Not for Mitchell, but for the Penelope from 30 years ago, the timid girl in a wedding dress, afraid she was too ambitious to be the perfect wife. I burned the letter in the sea breeze and whispered to her, "Thank you for not giving up. We finally found our way home." Penelope's story is clear proof that women aren't born to endure, but to choose the life they truly deserve. When trust was betrayed, she didn't collapse. She used the pain to rebuild herself, her career, and her dignity. At 52, she didn't just divorce with grace, she became a symbol of recovery and financial independence. In real life, every woman has the right to stand up, walk away from what no longer serves her, and write a new chapter fueled by her own resilience. What do you think about Penelope's journey? What would you do if it were you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more heartfelt, powerful family stories coming soon.